the forgotten corners of rural Rhode Island, where the mist clings like a living memory and the old trees whisper secrets to one another, there is a place where even the bravest dare not tread after dark. To the unsuspecting, it is simply a lonely farmhouse with sagging shutters and creaking floors. But those who know truly know understand that the soil itself remembers blood, betrayal, and blasphemy. It was here amidst the decaying remnants of time that Bathsheba Sherman carved her name into the annals of terror. It was here that Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famed seekers of the supernatural, faced one of their darkest battles. Beneath the rotted beams of the Perrin family's home, they confronted a force so ancient and malevolent that it defied even their hardened beliefs. This is not a tale of cinematic exaggerations. This is the legacy of Bathsheba, the woman who, even in death, refused to be forgotten. Long before the Perrin family ever stepped foot into the farmhouse, the land bore witness to a chilling chapter of American history. Bathsheba Thayer was born in 1812 into a world stitched together by rigid Puritan beliefs and secret fears of the unnatural. She married a local farmer, Judson Sherman, and together they lived in a sprawling estate in Harrisville, Rhode Island, a home that would later become synonymous with horror. The Shermans were known for their wealth and their connection to the influential families of the time. Bathsheba was described as a striking woman, sharp-featured, with a proud demeanor that some found unsettling. However, behind closed doors, rumors began to ferment. There were whispers, persistent, that Bathsheba was cruel to her servants, that she practiced strange rites at night in the woods, and most chillingly, that she had made a pact with the devil himself. The most damning accusation emerged after the mysterious death of an infant under her care. The child was found dead under suspicious circumstances, with a puncture wound at the base of its skull, as if a needle had been driven directly into its brain. Bathsheba was arrested and charged with murder, yet owing to the lack of concrete evidence, she was never convicted. Despite her legal acquittal, the court of public opinion found her guilty. In the tightly knit community, she became a pariah, an outcast, a living specter before death had even claimed her. Historical records suggest that after the death of the child, Bathsheba's life was marked by tragedy and isolation. It is said that her own children, if she had any who survived infancy, lived short, unhappy lives. Her husband, Judson, reportedly went mad before his death, rambling about visions and the woman with the hollow eyes. Bathsheba herself died in 1885 under mysterious and unsettling conditions. According to some accounts, her body turned to stone, a grotesque suggestion of divine punishment. Townsfolk whispered that her form was frozen in agony, her muscles twisted unnaturally, her skin a pallid gray. She was buried in the Baptist cemetery in Harrisville, though even death could not silence the rumors. Visitors reported strange phenomena at her grave: voices whispering in the wind, cold hands grasping their ankles, shadows moving against the gravestones at dusk. It was said that Bathsheba, consumed by rage and bitterness, refused to move on. Her spirit remained tethered to the land, festering over decades, growing ever more malevolent. The farmhouse, originally built in 1736, was a place layered with tragedy even before Bathsheba's time. Deaths from illnesses, suicide, drownings, and even murder had been documented there. It was as if the land itself was poisoned, cursed to breed misery. By the time the Perron family arrived in 1971, the house had already seen generations of sorrow, but it was Bathsheba's shadow that would loom largest over them. Or Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter of the Perrin family, would later describe the entity they encountered as a horrific force, one that sought to assert dominance over the living. The spirit identified itself, sometimes subtly, sometimes violently, in ways that made it clear. When Roger and Carolyn Perrin first laid eyes on the sprawling farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, it was a dream come true. The year was 1971, and they were a young couple with 5 daughters, eager to start a new life in the countryside. The house, with its weathered, clapboard siding, sloping fields, and ancient oak trees, seemed to breathe history. But almost immediately, subtle cracks began to form in their idyllic vision. And from those cracks, darkness seeped through. It began with small things. Footsteps echoed in the halls when no one was there. Doors creaked open on their own. A cold, foul-smelling draft would snake through the house, even when all windows were shut tight. The girls, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, reported seeing apparitions. At first, they were harmless. The spirit of a little boy wandering the halls, or a weeping woman in gray standing at the foot of their beds. These phantoms seemed confused, lost, sorrowful, not malevolent. But not all entities were so benign. One night, young Cindy came running into her parents' bedroom, shaking and pale. She whispered that the voices in the walls had warned her. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the cellar. Roger, skeptical but protective, searched the basement. All he found was damp stone and the oppressive feeling of being watched. But the house was only just beginning to reveal its true nature. As the months passed, the atmosphere grew heavier. The Perrin family experienced physical attacks, slaps, hair pulling, scratches appearing on their bodies overnight. Aunt Carolyn Perrin became the primary target. She would often feel a sharp jab in her side as if from a long, thin needle, a chilling echo of BATHSHEBA's alleged crime. Bruises and cuts appeared on her body with no apparent cause. At times, she would drift into a trance, speaking in guttural voices or collapse without warning. There were moments when Carolyn would catch glimpses of a grotesque woman, her neck twisted unnaturally, her face seething with hatred glaring at her from dark corners of the house. The girls, too, were tormented. Beds would levitate. Chairs would be yanked from beneath them. They spoke of a foul entity that would yank their legs at night, dragging them halfway off the bed. The smell of rotting flesh became a regular guest. April, the youngest, claimed to have made a friend a spirit she called Rory. But even her innocent encounters took on a sinister edge when she described how Rory had died. He said he was hidden in the woods and he was very, very cold. As the hauntings intensified, the family sought answers. Research into the house's history revealed that many tragic deaths had occurred on the property: hangings, drownings, and murders. But the most chilling discovery was BATHSHEBA Sherman. Carolyn, increasingly frail and paranoid, claimed that BATHSHEBA herself had taken up residence in the home. She believed BATHSHEBA coveted Roger's attention and viewed Carolyn as competition. Andrea Perron later wrote, "Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position." At times, Carolyn would feel invisible hands pressing against her throat, choking her until she almost lost consciousness. Other nights, she would awaken to the stench of sulfur and the weight of a presence pinning her to the bed. The entity had begun its campaign in earnest, and it would not stop until it claimed a soul. Exhausted and terrified, the parents turned to the only people they believed could help: Eshadette and Lorraine Warren, famed paranormal investigators known for their work on the Amityville Horror and other notorious cases. When the Warrens arrived, Lorraine immediately sensed a dark force unlike any she had encountered before. The house was not merely haunted, it was infested. The Warrens conducted interviews, gathered evidence, and attempted to reach the spirit world through seances. It was during one such session that the full fury of BATHSHEBA was unleashed. Carolyn was violently possessed, her body contorting in unnatural ways. She spoke in tongues, screamed blasphemies, and levitated several feet off the ground. Witnesses to the event would later say it was as though an invisible force tried to tear her from her very body, a horrifying, visceral spectacle that left even the seasoned Warrens shaken. Roger, protective and furious, ordered the Warrens to leave, fearing for his wife's life. But the damage had already been done. The veil had been lifted. There was no one seeing what lurked in the dark corners of their home. Though the Warrens' intervention helped to some degree, the parents continued to experience paranormal phenomena for years. It was not until they finally moved out of the house in 1980 that the family found peace. Yet the scars remained. Andrea Perron would later write a 3-volume memoir, House of Darkness, House of Light, detailing the full horror of their experiences, stories far more chilling than what Hollywood would dare portray. And BATHSHEBA? Her spirit, according to local legend, still clings to the farmhouse, lurking in the shadows, forever waiting for the next soul to claim. When Ed and Lorraine Warren crossed the threshold of Perrin Farmhouse, Lorraine immediately staggered backward. A crushing wave of despair, anger, and death radiated from the walls. It was as if the house itself had grown teeth ready to bite down on anyone foolish enough to challenge it. Ed, a devout Catholic demonologist, believed in the stages of demonic activity, right? Infestation, hauntings, poltergeist activity, oppression, mental, physical attacks, possession, loss of bodily control. And here at the Perrin house, the cycle was nearing its dark climax. The Warrens set up multiple nights of study. Cameras clicked in empty rooms. Tape recorders ran endlessly, capturing EVP, electronic voice phenomena, disembodied voices murmuring threats. Compasses spun wildly. Temperature sensors plummeted in seconds. Objects flew off shelves without warning. One night, Lorraine held a seance alone in the parlor. She later said she felt something clawing at her mind, whispering promises of death and pain. She described seeing the figure of a woman hanging from a beam in the ceiling, Bathsheba, her face swollen and blackened from the rope that had supposedly ended her life. But Bathsheba had not merely died. Lorraine believed Bathsheba had sworn allegiance to Satan on her deathbed, cursing the land and all who dared live on it. As the Warrens dug deeper, Carolyn's behavior worsened. She would lose hours of time, waking up in strange parts of the house. Her voice changed at times deep and masculine, at other times shrieking in rage. She grew emaciated, hollow-eyed, and cold to the touch. Andrea Perron later recalled, "My mother began to speak in languages not of this world. Sometimes she wept blood from the corners of her eyes." The family watched in horror as Carolyn would suddenly throw back her head and howl, her body rising inches off the bed. The Warrens knew an exorcism would be necessary, but there was a problem. In Catholic tradition, only a priest sanctioned by the church could perform a true exorcism. And the church, notorious for its skepticism and bureaucracy, would not approve without months, even years of investigation. Time they did not have. On a cold night in October 1973, Ed and Lorraine decided to attempt an emergency deliverance ceremony, a powerful seance meant to force the spirit to relinquish its hold. They gathered in the dining room. Lorraine led the ritual, surrounded by family, friends, and local paranormal investigators. The moment the ritual began, the house seemed to react violently. Winds howled outside, though the night was still. The heavy dining table trembled. Paintings crashed from the walls. Carolyn, seated in the center, began to convulse. Her head snapped back, and an inhuman growl tore from her throat. Witnesses reported the lights exploded in their sockets. Carolyn's chair levitated off the ground and hurled backward across the room. She spoke in a deep, guttural voice, spewing vile blasphemies. Andrea, forbidden from attending the seance, secretly watched through a crack in the door. She would later say, "I thought I was going to faint. It was not my mother's voice. It was something evil wearing my mother's skin." The entity identified itself during the ritual. "Bathsheba, she commands here." Lorraine later revealed that during the seance, she had a terrifying psychic vision. She saw the farmhouse in flames, with the bodies of the Perrin girls burning inside. She saw Bathsheba's spirit laughing, dancing in the ashes. The message was clear. If the family stayed, they would die. The seance left Carolyn weakened, but temporarily free from direct possession. But the Warrens knew they had merely scratched the surface. Bathsheba was wounded, not defeated. Roger Perrin, fearing for his wife's sanity and furious at the violence of the seance, demanded the Warrens leave immediately. Although the Warrens had helped loosen Bathsheba's grip, the family continued to suffer lower-level hauntings for another several years. They endured footsteps, cold spots, flickering shadows, but the worst of the attacks ceased. In 1980, they finally sold the farmhouse and moved away. The terror lessened, but none of them were ever truly the same. Carolyn carried deep emotional scars. Andrea became obsessed with the paranormal. All 5 daughters would grow up haunted by memories, if not spirits. The current owners of the old Arnold estate claim that paranormal activity still occurs doors opening, Disembodied voices, cold spots suggesting that whatever Bathsheba unleashed has never truly left. The Perrin case became immortalized in popular culture through The Conjuring, 2013, though Andrea Perron herself insists the movie only scratches the surface of the true horror. As Lorraine Warren said decades later, it wasn't just haunted, it was infected. Some evils, it seems, are never truly exorcised. Bathsheba Thayer was born in Rhode Island in 1812. By all accounts, she was a striking young woman, tall, with piercing eyes and a manner that set her apart in the rigid, God-fearing Puritan community. She married Judson Sherman in her early 20s, moving into the Arnold estate, the very farmhouse that would one day torment the Perrins. For a time, Bathsheba lived as many women of her day did, cooking, cleaning, raising livestock. But rumors soon began to swirl like storm clouds around her name. Something was wrong. The first major scandal came in whispers. A neighbor's infant mysteriously died under Bathsheba's care. When the small body was examined, a single puncture wound was found at the base of the skull, as if a large needle had been driven into it. Whispers turned to roars. Had Bathsheba sacrificed the child in a ritual? Was she serving something dark, some ancient hunger? She was brought to trial, but evidence was scant. The courts, bound by earthly law, acquitted her. Yet in court of public opinion, Bathsheba Sherman was guilty. Forever branded a witch, some villagers swore they saw her walking through fields at dusk, speaking to unseen companions. Livestock was found dead, crops blighted. Children were warned, if you don't behave, Bathsheba will come and take you in the night. After the trial, Bathsheba became a pariah. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid her. Women shielded their children from her passing gaze. Bathsheba herself seemed to embrace the fear. She grew cruel, bitter, lashing out at visitors, cursing under her breath. She rarely attended church, and when she did, the preacher claimed her presence chilled the room. Her husband Judson, it is said, retreated into silence, rarely speaking of her even to close friends. Several of Bathsheba's own children, accounts vary on the number between 3 and 4, died before reaching adulthood. While child mortality was tragically common in those days, tongues wagged. She sacrificed them to keep her youth, they whispered. She drinks the blood of her own. Bathsheba died in 1885 under strange circumstances. Some say she died of a strange paralysis that contorted her body, her features frozen in a mask of rage and agony. Others claim her death was entirely unnatural, her body turning rigid as stone within moments. According to local lore, the attending doctor, a man named Dr. McKeever, was so disturbed by her death that he refused to ever set foot in the house again. Her tombstone lies in the Harrisville Cemetery. It reads simply, Bathsheba Sherman, 1812, 1885. Yet her grave, according to reports even today, is often found desecrated, cracked, overturned, its name scratched at by unseen hands. The locals say she never truly died. Her spirit seeped into the soil, poisoning the land. Anyone daring to settle the Arnold estate would find themselves under her malevolent gaze. When Lorraine Warren investigated the Perrin haunting, she conducted extensive research into Bathsheba's history. She concluded that Bathsheba had indeed practiced dark rituals, perhaps linked to Old World witchcraft or early satanic rites whispered about in the remote parts of New England. Lorraine believed Bathsheba's allegiance to darkness allowed her spirit to remain earthbound, but in a corrupted form. No longer fully human, Bathsheba had become a wraith, a malevolent entity fueled by jealousy, hatred, and ancient pacts. Bathsheba had one goal: to destroy any family that dared to call her cursed land home. Some paranormal researchers argue that it wasn't Bathsheba alone. The Arnold estate was built on land stained with blood long before her. Native American burial grounds were nearby, disturbed during colonization. Multiple suicides, murders, and drownings had occurred on the property over the centuries. 5 generations of tragic deaths cursed the soil beneath the house. Bathsheba, they believed, became a conduit of focus for centuries of accumulated evil. In that theory, Bathsheba wasn't the cause, she was the catalyst. A spirit, once human, now a vessel for something far more ancient and terrifying. Even in the 21st century, visitors to the Perron house, now occasionally open for tours, report seeing a tall, shadowy woman standing at windows, hearing a woman's voice calling from empty rooms, feeling invisible hands clutch their throats or shove them. The current owner's brave souls claim they have learned to live with the spirits, but admit the house remains very active. It seems Bathsheba still watches, still waits, still whispers. Not long after their first official investigation at the Perron home, Ed noticed something unusual. Lorraine had begun wearing long sleeves, even in the summer. When Ed finally convinced her to show him, Lorraine lifted her sleeve to reveal a spiral-shaped burn on her forearm. It wasn't an ordinary burn, it twisted into a rough spiral, almost resembling a primitive brand. No, Lorraine wept as Ed touched it. It pulsed with heat, even though no wound had been made recently. She marked me, Lorraine whispered, as her enemy, and the mark never truly healed. It faded slightly with prayer, but like a wound etched into her soul, it would darken again during times of spiritual weakness. Lorraine's dreams continued to worsen. One particularly cold February night, she dreamt that she was back inside the Perron house. The air was thick with the smell of iron and rot. She wandered the halls, calling for Ed, but no one answered. Instead, she found herself in the house's attic, a place the Perrons themselves were too frightened to enter. There, dangling from the wooden beams, were dozens of dolls, each doll bearing the face of someone Lorraine had tried to save. A girl drowned in a well. A boy who fell from a second-story window. A woman driven mad by poltergeist activity. Bathsheba stood in the shadows, her hands slick with black blood, sewing a new doll, Lorraine's own face stitched onto it crudely. Bathsheba whispered, "You can't save them. You can't even save yourself." Lorraine awoke screaming, clutching the cross at her neck so tightly it left cuts across her palm. The Bathsheba case placed an enormous strain on Ed and Lorraine's marriage. Ed would later confess, "I watched my wife crumble before my eyes. She who had faced demons without blinking, she now jumped at shadows." Lorraine, once strong and unshakable in her faith, began to doubt. Some days she wouldn't eat. She refused to sleep without 3 blessed crucifixes nearby. She began hearing laughter of Bathsheba's voice even during Mass. Their evenings, once spent quietly reading scripture together, became battlefields of whispered prayers and sudden, unexplained bursts of anger. There were times when Lorraine would suddenly accuse Ed of being a traitor or murderer, words she would never normally utter. Minutes later, she would collapse into his arms, sobbing, not remembering anything she said. The oppression Bathsheba had loosed upon the Perrons was now sinking its teeth into the Warrens themselves. Ed petitioned the Catholic Church to perform a full exorcism on the Perron home. But the church hesitated. The Perrons were not devout Catholics. No deaths had occurred recently, and Bathsheba's presence, while dangerous, did not fit the neat boxes of demonic possession. Desperate, Ed and Lorraine agreed to conduct a private exorcism ritual in secret, knowing full well it could cost them dearly. The night they attempted it, the air outside the Arnold estate dropped to a bone-chilling cold. Inside, the house moaned and creaked as if alive, as if it knew what they were planning. Lorraine later described the atmosphere that night. It was as though the walls themselves disapproved of what we were about to do. Ed recited the Roman ritual, assisted by 2 local priests who had agreed to help unofficially. Lorraine knelt, clutching a rosary, her hands trembling uncontrollably. At first, everything was silent, except for the low Latin chanting. But then, the lights began to flicker violently. An invisible force slammed the doors and windows shut. A sulfurous stench filled the room, so thick it made the priest gag. Suddenly, Carolyn Perron, the mother, began to convulse. Her body lifted several inches off the floor. She screamed, not in her own voice, but in a deep, guttural growl that seemed far too large to come from her human body. "My house! My blood! Leave or be swallowed!" Lorraine, in horror, saw Carolyn's eyes turn black as coal. Bathsheba had fully manifested through her. As Ed and the priest fought to drive Bathsheba out, Lorraine experienced what she would later describe as an out-of-body attack. She was dragged into a vision. She stood at the center of a great rotting forest. The trees bled from their trunks. The ground was made of writhing, screaming faces. Bathsheba appeared from the shadows, her form enormous, monstrous, her skeletal hands reaching out. Lorraine realized with bone-deep terror, if she touched me here, she could claim my soul. She fell to her knees, reciting the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel again and again, even as her voice grew hoarse. At the climax of the exorcism, as Ed forced Bathsheba to depart, Lorraine felt herself being snapped back into her body as if a string had been violently yanked. She collapsed into Ed's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The house grew silent once more. The ritual had worked partially. Bathsheba's stranglehold was weakened. But Lorraine knew Bathsheba had not truly been destroyed. She had simply been driven deeper underground, waiting. In her final years, Lorraine would rarely speak of Bathsheba. But once in a recorded interview, she said something chilling. Bathsheba is not like other spirits. She is something older, closer to the ancient gods than to humanity. She feeds on our despair, our anger. She isn't dead, not in the way we think of death. As long as people suffer, Bathsheba will always have a place to return. After the Warrens left, the Perron family stayed in the house for several more years. Although the worst had passed, Bathsheba's presence never fully faded. Doors still slammed themselves shut in the dead of night. Footsteps echoed through empty hallways. Whispers, soft, angry, and sometimes pleading, brushed against the ears of sleeping children. Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter, later wrote in her memoir, "The house was never clean. It always felt like something you couldn't scrub out, something under your skin." The house had become a living thing, a creature that breathed, mourned, and hungered. In 1980, the Perrons finally moved out, but the darkness remained. Over the next few decades, the farmhouse changed hands several times. Each set of owners reported disturbing phenomena. Furniture would rearrange itself while no one was home. Spectral women in gray gowns were seen weeping by the fireplaces. Strange, animalistic growls would vibrate through the walls, even when no pets were present. Some reported waking with bruises, scratches, and even small puncture wounds, as if bitten by invisible teeth. Psychics who visited the site refused to stay past sunset. Several investigators claimed to have been physically attacked, pushed, scratched, or temporarily blinded. The pattern was clear. Bathsheba had not been exorcised. She had simply adapted, waiting for new victims. When James Wan's film The Conjuring, released in 2013, it catapulted the Perron haunting and Bathsheba's legend into pop culture. But what few people knew was this. The film's production itself was plagued with problems. Vera Farmiga, who portrayed Lorraine, woke up with 3 unexplained claw marks on her thigh the day after reading the script. Her laptop repeatedly showed strange, deep scratches across the screen. No source could be found. Director James Wan reported hearing whispers on the soundstage when no actors were present. Lorraine Warren herself visited the set once and left abruptly. When asked why, she simply said, "She knows we're talking about her." Was Bathsheba's spirit angered by her betrayal? Was the renewed attention feeding her strength once again? Following the success of The Conjuring, modern paranormal investigators rushed to the Perron farmhouse, now dubbed the Conjuring House. They brought with them state-of-the-art equipment, thermal cameras, EMF detectors, spirit boxes. What they found disturbed even the skeptics. In 2014, a team recorded an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, of a woman snarling, "Mine, mine, mine." In 2016, an experienced medium collapsed during a live investigation, screaming, "The lady, she wants blood." In 2018, during a live-streamed ghost hunt, viewers reported seeing a pale woman standing behind the investigators, even though no one was physically there. Some investigators refused to ever return to the house. A few had mental breakdowns or suffered car accidents within weeks of visiting. Privately, many whispered the same name, Bathsheba. Modern researchers have tried to untangle the real Bathsheba. Historically, Bathsheba Sherman was a woman accused of witchcraft in the 1800s, though never legally charged. She was blamed for the death of an infant in her care, rumored to have been found with a sewing needle driven into its skull. Some believe she was an innocent woman, a victim of rural hysteria. Others, particularly psychics and demonologists, argue something darker. That Bathsheba was involved in occult rituals, that she willingly sacrificed the child to a demonic entity in exchange for earthly power, that even in death she refused to surrender her soul to God, binding herself to the physical realm by blood. As Lorraine Warren herself once said, Bathsheba was not just a spirit, she was a blasphemy against nature. In 2020, the Conjuring House was sold to a new set of owners who opened it for public investigations. What followed was a resurgence of activity, and tourists fainting without warning. Investigators reporting possessions. One man reportedly spoke in an ancient dialect of Latin, despite never having studied the language. Physical attacks during seances. Terrifying disembodied screams recorded on tape. One chilling photograph taken during a seance shows a figure in the shadows, a woman with long tangled hair and hollow black eyes, leaning over a guest, unseen at the time. Many believe Bathsheba's curse has never weakened, only evolved, adapting to new times, new fears. And as more people seek her out, hungry for thrills and ghost stories, they unknowingly feed her strength. Lorraine Warren passed away in 2019. Her last public statement about Bathsheba was haunting. There are things in this world older than God as we know him. Be careful what you invite in. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Today, the farmhouse still stands. Tourists still visit. Investigators still dare to whisper Bathsheba's name aloud. But the ground beneath the house is soaked with history and horror. And Bathsheba waits patient, silent, hungry. Her legacy isn't over. It's only just beginning. Before you turn off the lights tonight, ask yourself, if Bathsheba could survive centuries fueled by hate, what else might be lurking, forgotten, just outside our understanding? Is a haunting only about a place? Or can an evil entity follow bloodlines, names, even stories? When we speak of the dead, when we film their memories, are we remembering them or reviving them? If fear gives them power, how much strength have we already given Bathsheba just by telling her story again? When you hear a creak tonight in your empty hallway, will you still believe you're alone? And that concludes the poignant and complex story of Bathsheba, her resilience, her trials, and her place in history.